My most viral video this year was one that I made to Hank Green about knitting, but I've made several before and since about knitting as resistance, knitting as the original stem, knitting as an inherently political and subversive act, the long history of knitting in resistance movements in the US and abroad, knitting in the American Revolution. Y'all, I could continue to go down that rabbit hole about how important handwork, in particular, the unobserved, under the radar handwork of women, has been a tool for political change in this country. You may or may not be familiar with the term craftivism. A lot of people, I think, because especially of those pink kitty cat hats, I can't say the P word because last time I said it, YouTube demonetized my whole video. I've also seen people criticize yarn bombing as similarly performative and not really affecting change. But I think that we would do well here to understand the real and significant ways that craftivism, or as some people say, weapons of mass construction, is a tool that people use to fight back against Trump. And there's a piece out in The Guardian yesterday. It's by Cecilia Noel, and it talks about this issue, and it focuses on my hometown, Portland, Oregon. So I wanted to share some of it with you. Now, I know I primarily talk about knitting and other fiber arts and how important those have been in the American Revolution, World War I, World War II, environmental and social justice movements. Yes, absolutely, but it's not exclusively fiber arts. I made a couple of videos in the last several months about whistle brigades and, folks coming together to form these Migro Watch groups. And in that video, I talked about 3D printers, and I shared the pattern for 3D printed really loud whistles. And somebody in one of my local organizing groups was like, why do we need people to 3D print whistles? We can just order them really cheap off of Alibaba or, places like that. And I was like, no, don't you understand? Yeah, it's not about whether or not it's the cheapest option available. In World War II, we had machine knitting. We had the capability of having mass production of socks for our soldiers at the front. But here and in the UK, hand knit socks were about having people feel connected to the effort, giving people a sense of purpose, a way that they can contribute, use their hobbies and their skills to get people invested. And I was saying, the whole point of having 3D printed whistles is think about all those nerds all over the place who are just like itching for a way that they can use their hobby to help contribute, to get involved in the resistance movement. How many people out there are like, oh my God, I've got a 3D printer. I can print whistles. Like, I can use my crafts to help out. Finally, right? That is what craftivism is all about. It's not really about whether or not it's the most cost-effective or efficient way of advancing something within your organization, within your movement. It's really about getting people invested. It's helping people feel connected, feel like they can use their skills to get involved. And once they start showing up to your knitting protest, or they start 3D printing whistles, or they start baking goods for your local bake sale, they're going to get involved in other kinds of organizing, other kinds of resistance. They're going to feel connected and valued and needed. It's not about efficiency above all. It's about people power. It's about community organizing. So please think about that framework as I share just a little bit of this article with you. I really encourage you to go read the whole thing. In early October, Tracy Wright invited a group of other women in her social circle, all fellow knitters, to gather outside the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility in their hometown of Portland, Oregon. They were, quote, armed with their weapons of mass construction. At the time, Trump had just ordered National Guard troops deployed for the city. How'd that work out for you, buddy? Which he called war-ravaged in order to protect ICE facilities he said were under siege by anti-fascists and other domestic terrorists. Let's be really clear here. The only one waging war against American cities is Donald Trump and his Gestapo goons known as ICE. Wright, like a lot of other Portlanders, wanted to show the world that we were not a war-ravaged city and that life was going on as normal here. She also wanted to be a friendly face, greeting immigrants arriving at the ICE facility for appointments, but I didn't want to go by myself, she said. I wasn't sure what to expect. So she and the other women, who would eventually nickname themselves Knitters Against Fascism, brought their knitting needles and lawn chairs and returned week after week. Word of the knit-ins quickly spread by word of mouth and social media. When a friend at her local Knitters Guild mentioned the protest, knitwear designer Michelle Lee Bernstein decided to attend to show that Portland wasn't, quote, burning to the ground. A group of knitters calmly knitting was a perfect visual counter to the lie. Knowing other crafters would be there made it easy to participate. And this, I think, is the second factor in engaging in craftivism and helping connect people through their hobbies, right? You may not have much in common, but if you can show up around a similar craft or even different crafts, like, hey, bring whatever handwork, maybe it's needlepoint, maybe it's knitting, maybe it's crochet, maybe you're sketching or doing watercolor. Let's all show up and do our crafts together. You now suddenly have a common ground. You have an entree for people into the community. People can connect so much over hobbies. And then they can use those hobbies to contribute, and they can use those hobbies as a conduit to get plugged in and level up to greater actions. Small acts can make big change, Bernstein said. She posted a frog hat pattern on her website and a month later learned that a church group had raised $550 for a local food bank by selling hats that they had knit with the pattern. She also sold one of the hats she made herself for $100 and donated the funds to the Northeast Emergency Food Program. Even if we're not all down at ice, we're working together to do something good, she said. The article then goes on to discuss the ways that people have connected and advanced their political and social causes through craftivism. And again, I really encourage you to go to my YouTube channel and watch some of my videos on the history of knitting and fiber arts in political movements in the US. And this was the paragraph that really got me in this article. One of the big challenges in movement building is to build solidarity across different groups of people, says Hari Hahn, a political scientist at Johns Hopkins University. At a certain point in the history of every social movement that has ever changed the world, there's a point at which the movement gets challenged or things get hard for whatever reason. And in moments of stress, the motivations that keep people together or keep movements together are often their social relational commitments more than their commitment to the issue itself. It's not whether or not the yarn bombing or the hats you're knitting or whatever are performative. It's understanding that craftivism is a movement building tool, a relational community building tool, as much as it is actually in some kind of tangible way contributing to the cause itself, either through fundraising or making necessary goods. The article goes on to interview Shannon Downey, who uses her embroidery for political causes. And she says, I just started to see craftivism as like the greatest community organizing tool that could exist. I completely agree. Going back to Hahn, the political scientist at Johns Hopkins, community building alone is not enough to build a movement. A movement must bring people into community with each other so that they begin to understand the ways in which what they can do together is greater than what they could do alone. And it also becomes a space through which they realize their interests in the public sphere. There's even more layers to craftivism than that. The embroiderer Shannon Downey said, creating in a time of destruction and chaos, that is resistance in and of itself. And I completely agree. When it feels like everything is falling apart around you, everything is very bleak and dark, the fact that you can come together with other people and create something beautiful, and that act, right, that act of creating art centers joy. We're centering our own ability to create beautiful things. We're centering our connection, our shared skill with other people, and we are centering joy at the same time. I love this last quote here from her. There's a lot of anger and rage in the work that we're doing right now. That's the catalyst for much of us taking action, right? I've said before that hope is a really powerful driver in resistance movements, but so is anger. Anger is not a negative. Our anger can help drive us, but we have to convert it into something productive. Right, Downey says you can't live in the energy of anger and rage, and that creating communities around shared passions, crafts, skills helps make the work that we're doing sustainable. I often take my knitting to protests. I take it to every community organizing meeting that I go to. I think that craftivism events in and of themselves are incredibly important for movement building, as well as for our own sustainability as human beings in this work.